Hi YouTube! In today's video we're finally doing the second installment of my Explaining Eras series, and I will be explaining the 1960s. I'll be talking about the shapes and styles of that era and some of the fashion icons, and as always helping you find inspiration to style yourself in that style in the present day. I hope you enjoy and find it interesting. So, as we know, fashion is always a reaction to what has come before. In the early 60s, the style probably still looks similar to the 50s. There was still that in and out and that shape. But as the era started to move ahead, we started to lose that in and out shape, and a whole new silhouette and figure and lots of new styles started to come around. Like in the 50s, the 60s really started seeing youth come about. They were gaining even more dominance away from their parents' styling and getting more income to spend. In the 50s, fashion was catered towards more wealthy people that were going to catwalks and buying beautiful bespoke items. In the 50s, you wanted to have French style. In the 60s, it had shifted, and London was now the place to be, the style that you wanted to have. Carnaby Street and Savile Row were the cool hip places of the swinging 60s. And that whole area and that whole style became very influential to the rest of the world. New shops started to come around in these areas that started to cater to a whole new kind of shopper. We were starting to see boutiques, small places, which was a self-service store, which is a whole different experience, less pushy, sales assistants. They looked more like the shopper themselves, just kind of floating around wearing the fashions of the store. And the main thing was that the clothes that were being offered were affordable, which was perfect for this new audience. In particular, Bieber was super fashionable. They had a very popular store. It was a Polish couple, and the store did very well from the 60s to the 70s. Before then, it got sold to Dorothy Perkins. In that time, they had many women under the age of 25 going there to experience not only the fashions, but the style of the shop and the experience it gave. The aesthetic was influenced by art styles like Art Nouveau, which you'll see in some of the kind of more swirly details of the shop and some of the print. And it was also inspired by Art Deco, which you'll see in the logo design as well. They had these communal fitting rooms where people would go and just get changed in front of each other, which a lot of people remember as quite a lovely experience, which is so different from the department stores of before. In general, shopping had become much more social than it ever was. And a lot of people not only remember the cute short dresses and go-go boots, but they also remember the feeling of Bieber. Speaking of the 1920s, eras always have influence from other eras, and there was a little bit of 20s going on. Hemlines in the 20s were quite short. They were kind of knee length, well, you'd see them like on the flapper girls. And the 60s took that and went the highest ever went with the miniskirt. Earliest sighting was in 1962 in Mexico, but really when it started to really get to fame was when Mary Kwon did it in 1964. Apparently it was called the miniskirt, not just being miniature length, but because she loved her mini car. And you'll see a lot of kind of mini Coopers around the 60s era as well, and Beetles. Inspired by the style that she saw on the streets from the youth, Mary Kwon took those hemlines to above the knee, which for us nowadays that seems like nothing, but back then this was super daring, as even the 20s hadn't gone that high up before. But Mary wasn't the only one, she just really pioneered it. We also had André Courage, also, I'm gonna get that name wrong, never said it out loud. He also experimented with these short hemlines, and he did a lot of space age dressing, which we were getting a lot of in this era, which I will get into too. And to go with these short hemlines that we're also seeing a lot of go-go boots, kind of high boots that go all the way up the leg to kind of fill in that skin gap. And we're also getting people filling their bare legs with long socks and colourful tights. So there were a lot of colourful legs. The boots that we were seeing typically tended to be white in colour, not sure why, or kind of poppy bright colours to go with that whole outfit. The heels themselves were a lot smaller than in the 50s, because I think in the 60s people were really starting to fall back on comfort that they had been missing from that sucked in tight era and prim and perfect era of the 50s. In the 60s we're getting these kind of smaller, blockier heels, or a little kitten heel, or just a completely flat shoe and boot. Now, in this time, the biggest style icon undoubtedly was Twiggy, named Twiggy because she was thin like a twig. Her boyish and almost kind of childlike frame became the it shape to have. So we're seeing quite a difference in the ideal body type from what we were seeing in the 50s, when people wanted to look voluptuous and curvy and feminine. People were flipping against that and now favouring a different kind of body shape, and fashion was catering to that too. So the dresses themselves also had become looser and kind of glossing over all those curves to make everyone look more kind of flatter and slimmer like Twiggy. Those shapeless dresses, which you can still get today, were called shift dresses, completely unstructured, short mini dresses above the knee. They're perfect actually if you're maybe an apple body shape and you just want to gloss over everything and show off your lovely legs. These shift dresses at the time were very popular in bright and poppy colours and prints, artsy style, the interesting kind of prints going on in that flat area, so it's almost like you're walking around with some artwork on yourself. In the 60s, fashion and art were really tightly bound. In 1965, the Mondrian dress by Yves Saint Laurent was super popular and really just drove that arty style even further. So the Mondrian dress is probably what you will think of when you think of 60s fashion, because it was just so iconic. Mary Kwon also contributed many fun styles, and she played with things like shirt collars and little ties and really interesting details on top of these comfortable dresses. We also had a Heinz soup can, which was made popular by Andy Warhol, not only as pop art, but we also saw that pop art then on the dresses full of Campbell's soup. People even making dresses out of paper in these fun styles. You can get these kind of disposable dresses as well. Fashion was becoming very fun, less buttoned up than it ever was in the era before. As I was saying, the space race was a huge influence on fashion. People were getting excited about the moon landing and the possibility of space, and it was translating into fashion. We were seeing lots of what they viewed the future into fashion, and we were seeing it in films like Space Odyssey, characters like Barbarella, Paco Rabanne, Pierre Cardin, and Andre Courageous were really big on this kind of spacey style and innovation. We were getting new fabrics that they could play with, like perspex, so we can play with this kind of see-through element of showing skin with interesting kind of spacey arty shapes. Vinyl, Gore-Tex, a smart fabric, PVC, so we're getting all these kind of spacey coats, waterproof coats. So fabric was also being innovated. Things were looking really next level. The mod style, which was huge, massive, came from the term modern, because they were feeling modern, they were feeling futuristic. Many of young people were flocking to this style, and the calling cards of it were those bright poppy colours, the shift dresses, and sharp haircuts. Vidal Sassoon made the short, blunt bob really popular. Fringes were blunt and probably short like mine. Hairstyles were getting as fun and arty as the clothing as well. Twiggy, of course, was pioneering that short haircut as well. We were getting lots of rounded, sharp bobs and interesting artsy hair styles like this. And Mary Quant herself had that short fringy bob thing going on as well. And yeah, maybe it was a little bit 1920s having that short haircut, but it was a lot straighter and blunter than the Marilyn-y type waves that we were having from the era before. Makeup wise, makeup was becoming much more prominent and again feeding into that arty style. The era before, we're having this sexy and glamour. This era, we're getting the bright colors translated into eye makeup and eyeshadows and these kind of cut creases and lines and interesting eyeliner work. Thanks to Twiggy, a lot of people were painting on extra eyelashes on as well to create this kind of big doll-like eye. In general, there was also a Dolly vibe that a lot of people were going for. So we were looking at sweet childlike details on these mini dresses. So lots of bows, lots of flowers, lace, cute collars with ties and bows, frilly socks, lacy tights, Mary Jane flat shoes, so these kind of childlike shoes as well. As I was saying earlier, there were lots of flat shoes. The shapelessness of the dress as well was really adding to this childlike feeling. In an era with more money and less responsibility, people must have felt this childlike sense of fun. They were experimenting, enjoying fashion, as well as the excitement of new discoveries and new breakthroughs. To go with the more girly style, some of the more girly hairstyles that we were getting tended to have lots of little curls, perhaps like a big updo with lots of extravagant curls and bows in it. Maybe it's half up and half down. There's a little bow here or there's a bow there. I'm sure a lot of you know these big beehivey things, but there were a lot of things being put into the hair like flowers and bows and hair bands and lots of accessories to go with these looks. And again, childish hairstyles like pigtails with little bows on them were super popular as well. People having money translated into more holidays, and it also translated into people traveling and seeing more of the world, and more styles being brought back and being brought into fashion, which led on to the hippies that we were starting to see in the later 60s. There were festivals like the Isle of Wight festival from 68 to 70, Woodstock in 1969, and this movement was about peace and love and freedom, which of course was a reaction to the wars that were still going on. When you go to a festival, I guess you also want to be super comfortable as well. For the hippie style, the hair was grown out super long. Facial hair was grown out, and this is getting a bit more 70s, but this is really where it's starting. Unlike the mods, the hippies were quite wild and untamed. We started to see the hippie style become more mainstream in the 70s. So we're getting longer hair, but it's neater, and we're getting some of these styles becoming more mass and more high street. And people going on holiday led to these Native American styles being incorporated to clothes, fringing, paisley, psychedelic prints. People were taking a lot of psychedelics at festivals, and it was translating into these kind of psychedelic fabrics and colours and swirls that we were seeing a lot of mainstream prints and fabrics too. And of course, Emilio Pucci took those swirly styles into the high end so that the rich could enjoy the psychedelic prints too. So those were kind of the main shapes and styles of that era. The fashion icons of the day also really contributed to the styles. Music was really key, and a lot of icons were musical icons, like, of course, the Beatles. We have to talk about them because they were huge. They popularized the fringe for both men and women as well. They didn't always have those fringes when they were still starting out and they were testing their music in clubs in Germany. They had the kind of Elvis teddy boy quiffs until they met a photographer, Astrid Kircher, and she had them comb all their hair forward and make fringes to look a bit like her boyfriend. But then she started dating their bass player at the time, who died, Stuart Sutcliffe. But she was a massive influence on the band's style. When they came back to the UK and they were a bit older, they got themselves a manager, Brian Epstein, and he was big on them smartening up their style. And they started to take on his style, which is the style of the Beatles that you probably know them for best. He had them wearing those matching suits because it gave them a really unified band style, so they were all wearing the same thing. They were wearing crisp tailoring. You're probably thinking of those colourless jackets with the shirt and the tie and the drainpipe trouser and the Cuban heel. Their manager loved the Cuban heel, and the Beatles definitely popularised men wearing those boots with heels. This is something that in our day, a man wearing a heeled boot is nothing, it's normal, but back then it's a big deal. Men probably hadn't worn heels since, I don't know, the Georgian times or something. They weren't able to afford such an extravagance, and now they were enjoying fashion more and having the money to enjoy fashion more. Many other bands also took to wearing suits or matching outfits as well to have that band unity. When the Beatles went to India later in the 60s, they also jumped on that hippie style and they took that home. They grew their hair, they grew out their facial hair, they started wearing psychedelic colours and prints and being less matchy and wearing flares and velvets and interesting things, which definitely started getting the mass more into the hippie style as well. So another interesting person that definitely influenced fashion, who wasn't a musician, Jackie Kennedy. She also popularized the suiting for women. Suits were still just as big in the 60s. They were just less tailored, but still very close and tight to the body, but we're getting that shorter length. We're getting more interesting colours. And of course, being a first lady, she wore suits quite often, but she was more daring with her suits. She was wearing short length, she was wearing pink, she was really having fun with it, and that was influential. We also saw Yves Saint Laurent making their smoking suit for women, which was a kind of masculine styled suit, so we're getting more women wearing that kind of suit as well. Like I mentioned in the 50s video, Audrey Hepburn wore a lot of Givenchy, and her film Breakfast at Tiffany's in 61 really popularized the little black dress. People were wearing black, but it was still a color that we were thinking of funerals more probably, although Coco Chanel definitely popularized black. This film had made it even more cool. And yeah, 61. We still weren't getting that many shapeless styles yet. It was still a little in and out, but we're definitely getting this cool and chic glamour and kitten heel of the 60s. Many people had a muse, many designers, many artists like Andy Warhol had a muse. Eddie Sedgwick. She was like America's answer to Twiggy. She was slim, she had a short blonde haircut. She was the original it girl, perhaps. We also had Mia Farrow, former wife of Frank Sinatra, who had a playful look and really pixie short haircut. We're seeing lots of short haircuts on women. A very popular supermodel of the time, as well as Twiggy, was Jean Shrimpton. She probably paved the way for Twiggy because straight after the 50s there was her, and she was a lot slimmer than 50s models. So she definitely paved the way for a new kind of body shape, and you would see her in a lot of pictures with very sweet and feminine style. Another musical influence on fashion were the Supremes. Like the Beatles, wearing matching looks, which you'll see a lot of people copying, but with plenty of fun and glamour. Diana Ross in particular was becoming a major fashion icon that people still look to for inspiration today. Many musicians' partners also became fashion icons in their own right, such as Patti Boyd, who inspired many musical hits, but she also inspired fashion with her cute and sweet style. Jane Birkin was so big at the time, another icon, that she had a bag named after her, the Birkin bag by Hermes, in 1984. This was when the contents of her straw bag that she was famous for carrying around fell out on a plane in front of the Hermes executive, and then she got a bag named after her. But she was a big fashion icon in the 60s as well, with her cute mini baby doll dresses, French style. So there were many it girls and there were many musical icons that people were looking to for fashion inspiration in the 60s. How can we do this all now? Like in my 50s video, of course, I will put links at the bottom. But what I'd say to look out for in your own wardrobe, or if you're out in the shops that will maybe feel more 60s. Firstly, the colours were quite bright and poppy if you're going for that mod style, or maybe it's a monochrome for that kind of poppy art style. Or if you're leaning into the hippies, then you're looking at those kind of autumnal shades. And print-wise, you're looking for fun prints. You could be looking for flowers, you could be looking for psychedelic swirls, you could be looking for some really clear, clean cut lines and stripes. Shape-wise, you're looking for these unstructured but still close-fitting shift dresses and mini dresses, mini skirts, that short length, a dungaree style. and then putting something underneath it, a polo with long sleeves or short sleeves, and try accessorizing with a lot of fun as well. You might just want to take to a lot of really clean-cut Savile Row tailoring. Savile Row is still very big for tailoring. Colourful tights and socks. Maybe you want a knee sock. Maybe you want to try that long boot. And as with many past eras, the patterns, which are those templates that you can follow to make your own pieces, are still available, very cheap. You can find them easily if you want to directly make something era specific. Even if you're not great at sewing, shift dresses are pretty easy to make. In fashion school, that was one of the first things we started with. You can get someone to make it for you, or you can go charity shop hunting, or you can be out shopping and find something that feels just like a little light nod to that era if you don't want to go full costumey. Enjoy looking deeper into the 60s, whether that's listening to 60s music, watching 60s inspired TV shows, going on a deep Pinterest rabbit hole like I did, researching these pictures and seeing what's in museums. V&A in London always has fantastic stuff. A few years ago I went to a Mary Kwon exhibit that was amazing, and they had a lot, and there's a lot you can find out there, so enjoy. I hope that you found this interesting and helpful. If you would like to find what era works for you with me, whether that's this era or other eras, then please get in touch. Thank you for watching this video. Goodbye.